Hello, Geography 231 students. Welcome to this week's tutorial. It is week 5, and we are continuing our discussion on census data. So first thing I want to point out, you'll already know this by the time you see the video, there's no lecture this week. It's just this tutorial video and then the lab. The lab is it's probably a little bit on the long side, a little bit longer than last week's. And so because we're still continuing on the subject of census data, there's not a whole lot new to discuss on that front other than just that we are still researching how to access it, how to visualize it in ArcGIS Pro, and this week we're going to get into a bit more of the spatial analysis side of things versus just simply making a map. We're going to actually come up with pull some new information from the spatial data itself. So to begin, I'm going to introduce this week's lab. I'm calling it Working with Census Data Part 2, Assessing Housing Needs in Orange County. So this is another one of the labs I've built from scratch. I sort of took what we had last week and I built upon it. As I mentioned, we're going to do a bit more analysis this week. But again, you're going to have to go back to the data.census.gov and pull up the data that we're going to be looking for this week. And so without further ado, let me get into it. So I'm just going to read this intro here. Okay, so in this GIS lab, your goal is to create an affordable housing needs index for Orange County using readily available census data. Housing is at an all-time premium in Southern California, and especially in Los Angeles and Orange counties. Indeed, the average single-family home in Orange County costs $720,000 as of this month. But how do we quantify housing needs beyond the sheer cost of a home? In this lab, you will create a housing needs index to visualize the relative disparity from place to place across Orange County. So just tangentially, we know that housing prices are very expensive in Orange County, but that $720,000 number, obviously it varies from place to place, but beyond that, the impact of that price varies significantly from place to place. So there may be a median household income for Orange County, but it varies depending on where you're at. So you might live in, we'll say, Newport Coast, and a house at $720,000 is a steal, right? You could, buy a couple of houses at that price for the median home value up there. Conversely, if you live in perhaps some of the poorer parts of West Anaheim or Stanton or Santa Ana, places where the housing is still pretty expensive, but incomes are a bit lower, that $720,000 is a bit more insurmountable. So essentially what this does is we create an index to highlight areas where the need for housing is the greatest, taking into account income, then a couple of other factors I'll introduce in a bit. Okay, so to continue. To create your housing needs index, you will use the median household income data that we used last week, plus 2 new data sets that you will download from the U.S. Census Bureau. Housing tenure. And what housing tenure is, I know oftentimes we hear the term tenure in the context of like a education position, like a tenured teacher or tenured professor. Tenure is just the length of time, or the amount of time you're in a position, or the actual status of that position. Is it permanent or is it temporary? In the context of housing, housing tenure in this case indicates whether you own the home or whether you rent the home. Okay, so we have owner-occupied homes versus renter-occupied homes. So that's what that data set looks at. And then the third and final data set is tenure by occupants per room. So in that case, we're going to look at how many people, or I should say, let's see, what the total number of persons are per household divided by the total number of rooms in the household. So essentially, you'll find that the data set includes 0.5 to 1 person per room, 1 to 1.5 people per room, 1.5 to 2 persons per room, or greater than 2 persons per room. Okay, so if you think about a house with an occupancy rate of greater than 2 persons per room, that's actually a lot of people, right? So think about a 3-bedroom home. If we're talking about more than 2 persons per bedroom, then that's greater than 6 people. We're talking 7 people in a 3-bedroom house. Okay, so you can kind of see those numbers might seem low until you start to do the math, and you realize it also is 2 or more. So we could be talking 3 persons per bedroom or greater. Okay, so those are the 3 data sets we're looking at: median household income, whether the home is owner occupied or renter occupied, and how many occupants per bedroom. All right. So once you've downloaded and formatted the census data, you'll create a unique index system for each data set. Crucially, you will then create what I'm calling a master index by combining the three indices together. Finally, you will visualize the master index on a map, then highlight two block groups in extraordinarily high need of affordable housing. All right, so we're going to use this index to help zero in on neighborhoods that are in the greatest need of affordable housing. All right, so that's the goal. That is the goal and structure of this particular lab. All right, so let's get started. All right, so let's go ahead and navigate to data.census.gov, just like we did last time. And just like last time again, we're going to go ahead and click on that advanced search button. And in this case, we're going to be looking for the tenure data. So this tenure basically whether a home is owner occupied or renter occupied. So what we'll do is click on topics and then housing and then owner/renter household characteristics. And then you're going to go ahead and check on owner/renter tenure. But again, don't click search yet. We're going to go ahead and click on geography. And obviously you can see I've already been searching through here recently, so all these are already here. You're going to have to probably expand out these windows as you click through. But in my case, block group, California, Orange County, obviously, and then all block groups in Orange County. Okay, so this should be familiar since we did this just last week. But once again, don't click search. Now we need to specify which data set we're looking for. So go ahead and click on years, and then check 2018, and now click search. And your very first result should be tenure. Notice the year is 2018, and the table number is B25003. Let's go ahead and select that. And again, it's going to be too many records to display a preview, so just click on Download Table. Verify it's B25003, 5-year, 2018, CSV. Go ahead and click Download. Once it says we're preparing your files, once that's ready, go ahead and download it. I've already done it, so I'm not going to, but you go ahead and download that now, and you can pause the video if you need to. All right, so once you have that data, you're going to go ahead and click on the United States Census Bureau icon again to get back to the home page, advanced search, and this time we're going to be looking for the tenure by occupants per room. Okay, and this is going to get us the density per bedroom. So once again, geography, block groups, California, Orange County, all block groups in Orange County. And this time we're going to do a search instead of browsing for it. So just put your cursor up there. We're going to go B25014. That's the name of the table, the code for the table that we're looking for. And the first result is the one we want, tenure by occupants per room. Go ahead and select. And then click on years and verify that 2018 is the one that you're going to download. Check 2018, then close, then download your table, verify, once again, 5-year, 2018, CSV, then give it a download. Again, I already have the data, so I'm not going to, but you go ahead and download that now. Pause the video if you need to wait for it to download. And then once all of your data are downloaded, you're going to open up your downloads folder, just like I have. And I'm going to first open up, well, it doesn't really matter, you have to do them both, but I will unzip. I've already got them unzipped. So just go ahead and unzip your data, save them onto your C drive, wherever, wherever you want to, and wherever you think is most appropriate. And this here is our first data set. Actually, this is not the one I want to have open. Sorry about that. This one, 25003. This one has a bit less prep work than the other one. All right, so whenever I'm working in Excel, the first thing I do is I maximize the field headers. So just click in this button in the upper left-hand corner, and then double-click the separator, the line separator between one column and the next. Give it a double click, and it'll automatically size the column widths for you. Okay. All right. So let's see here. Here's what we're going to do. Okay. So in cell C1, we're going to replace the default name with total units. Okay. So this field header stands for the total housing units, including owner and renter occupied. So if it's a block group, we'll say block group 3 in census tract 320.49. There is a total of 791 housing units in that block group. Of that, it looks like a total of 558 owner occupied and 233 renter occupied. All right, if you put those two numbers together, you get 791. Okay, so that's pretty simple and straightforward. Okay, in cell E1, we're going to replace the default name with owner occ. All right, for occupied. And again, I think I explained last week, when you're creating field headers, you want them to be as descriptive yet as short as possible. So owner occ, and then in cell G1, we're going to call it renter occ. And then go ahead and delete columns D, F, and H. And you are left with what follows. Get rid of that second row because we only need the coded names, not the full descriptions. And then the truncation, and this is the same as last week. I'm going to go through it probably faster than you if you're not real comfortable with Excel, but just follow the instructions. And the reason why I'm going through it faster than I would teach it typically is that there's a lot more to get through. So, okay, just do this real fast. We select all the cells, and this is just a real quick shortcut. A lot of times you'll see me like jump around pages really quickly. If you hold down the control button and use your arrow keys, it'll take you straight to the end of a column of data. As long as there are no gaps in the data, it will basically take you to where the data stops. Now, if there's a gap and then the data starts up again, you have to skip to where that next data range is, but it takes you to the end of the range. So I hold down Shift, Control, down, and that selects all of the data in that range. Okay. Now I'm going to click on Text to Columns, Fixed Width, Next. Put a line break after US, just like last week. This is all the same as last week. Select both columns before and after the line break in the preview. Change them to text. Always change them to text. You have to have that leading 0. The FIPS code for the state of California is 06. You can't lose that 0. So you have to always call it a text field, because if it's text, it will preserve a 0. If it's a number, that 0 gets lopped off because it serves no numerical value, because it's not a decimal. All right, so we basically lop off the sort of prefix. We're going to cut the name and paste it there over the GeoID. Then we're going to delete the prefix data, and this looks like this is pretty good. Now we still have another step to go. We're now going to create the index field. Now this is different than last week. Okay, so let me read this bit here. So the needs index for housing tenure will indicate a high need for housing in block groups with a high percentage of renter-occupied units. Think about a family of 6 living in a 1-bedroom apartment versus a family of 3 living in a 3-bedroom house. All right, think about just the rate of persons per bedroom is significantly higher in the former scenario versus the latter. We will use percentage of units occupied by renters as a stand-in for apartments and other multifamily dwellings. Of course, many families rent single-family homes too, your standalone home. But generally speaking, rentals tend to be of the smaller multifamily variety. So we are using renter-occupied units here as a proxy for high-density housing. In short, the higher the housing tenure index, the higher the percentage of housing units in a block group that are occupied by renters. That's basically what it comes down to. Okay, so let's go ahead and create that. So fast forward here. All right, so add a new field to serve as the housing needs index for housing tenure. In cell F1, we're going to call it tenure index. And then we're going to essentially just create a ratio. So we're going to go as a ratio of renter occupied of the total. So equals, renter occupied. So cell E2 divided by total units, cell C2, enter. So 29% of units in block group 03 of tract 320.49 are renter occupied. Okay, so 29.4%. So the fast shortcut way to populate all those cells below it is just you do Control-C, copy. Now here's something I don't have in the lab, and it's because it's hard to explain in written form. But if you put your cursor in a column that has a data range that's as long as the data range that you want to now fill out with your pasted values, you put your cursor there, then you do Control down. That takes you to the end of the range. So if I scroll down and see that's the end of the data set, now bring your cursor or your cell selection back over to the column that you're working in, hold down Control, Shift, up. That selects all the cells that you now want to fill out with the pasted values. Do Control V. Now we notice that all of these are occupied or filled out. So here's some integers. So a solid 1 means 100% of homes are renter occupied. 1. So 292 out of 292, it's 100%. You'll also find some zeros. So here's one where 0 homes out of 485 are renter occupied. All 485 of 485 are renter occupied. That means that 0% are renter occupied. All right. So the next step is written down in the lab. You're gonna select column F, the whole thing. Control copy, right click, paste values. And what that does is that takes the formula, and all it does is it copies the output, or the product in this case, or the quotient, I guess, because it's division, and pastes the actual output or the values as opposed to the formula itself. Notice up here in this area, you're seeing the actual values as opposed to the formulas. That's what you want to do, okay? All right, okay, so that's all we have here. And now you're going to do File, Save As, and again, save it into the location of your choosing. I've already got it saved somewhere, but you're going to call it tenure, and you're going to change the file format to XLSX, which is the standard Excel format. So tenure.xlsx, okay? I've already got mine, so I'm just going to close this one. All right. Okay, you're going to do the same thing now for the other data set that you just downloaded. Okay, and that's going to be for occupancy. There are going to be a few differences in terms of columns that you delete. You're going to delete quite a few more columns, so make sure you follow those instructions explicitly. Let's see here. Yeah, I'm not going to spend too much time on it because it is a repetitive task, but do take your time, pause the video as you work your way through it, okay? And also read all the paragraphs there that explain the rationale for why and how we create the index in this fashion. Because when it comes to an index, it's a quantitative value, but there are 100 different ways to create an index. There's not one single scientific method for it. So essentially what you're doing is you're creating a way to rank variables by having multiple input variables. And so there's probably tomes written on various index building methods. And so I came up with one that I think is going to work fine, but you may have another one. So at any rate, once you finish the occupancy per room, call that occupancy.xlsx, okay? And if you pause the video and you're now resuming, also make sure you collect the household income data from last week, all right? And then you're going to come up with a median household income index as well, and that's going to be more similar to the one that we just did together. All right, so once all 3 of your Excel data sets are prepped, you are then going to move on to preparing housing needs data for spatial visualization. This is on page 11 of your lab. Okay, so you can go ahead and pick up there if you pause the video and now are resuming. So that means that we're going to go ahead and open up ArcGIS Pro. All right, so open Arc Pro, create a new project, and call it Housing Needs. Okay, so I've saved it to my local C drive. The project name is Housing Needs. Go ahead and hit OK. It will then create the project with all of the requisite data connections, the geodatabase, the toolbox, every other component of a APRX project file. Once your project is ready to go, let's go ahead and rename the map to OC Housing Needs. Now we're going to change the coordinate system just like last week. So go to OC Housing Needs Properties, Coordinate Systems, do a search for California, the Californians. All right. State plane, NAD 1983 US feet, and we are in Zone 6 in Orange County. All right, and watch the map skew itself. When you're all zoomed out, it looks pretty silly, but when you zoom into Orange County, it's actually very spatially accurate. Wow, what did I end up doing? There we go. Okay. All right. I also have a note in here about adding State Plane Zone 6 to your favorites. You can do that as well. You just click on this little, I've already done that, but you just go ahead and click on the star there, and then it will appear in your favorites folder like this one has. Okay. All right, now we're going to add the census block groups to ArcGIS Pro. These are the same block groups that you created or downloaded and formatted last week. Okay, so open up your catalog pane and expand databases. Find your housing needs.gdb. It should be empty at this point, but we're now going to right click it and we're going to import a feature class, the block groups, from your last week's geodatabase into this one. When we say import, it basically just means copy. You're going to copy them and create a new version, but it's going to be identical to last week's. So feature class, input features, you're going to browse to last week's data, so make sure you know where that is. There's my OC block groups. That's what you want, OC block groups. Hit OK. Then output name, let's call it OC block groups housing. And that's just to differentiate it from last week in case, the two data sets ended up in the same map somehow. You wouldn't get confused which is which. And go ahead and run. And then while it's running, just talk. So next step is join Orange County block group geographic boundaries to the tabular census data. Now that you've formatted your tabular census data, for example, that is the housing index, housing tenure, occupancy per room, and median household income data from last week, and imported the Orange County block group boundary layer into your project geodatabase, it's now time to join the census data to the block groups using an attribute join, which is what we will do now. So go ahead and right click on OC block groups housing. You're going to go joins and relates, add a join, input table, obviously only option there, field on which to do the join, GeoID, just like last week. And now you need to browse to your data for the join. So let's find the data. Yours will be hopefully on your C drive somewhere. Okay, so we find tenure.xlsx, double click, select the Excel table inside. There should only be one. Go ahead and hit OK. And then by default, it should choose the GeoID field as the join table field. If it doesn't, just hit the drop down and select it. Hit OK. And then open up the attribute table, pan over to the right, and make sure that it includes the data from the Excel sheet, which it does. Total units, owner occupied, renter occupied, and tenure index. Okay. All right. Now we are going to do a multiple join. So we're going to join two more tables to the same OC block groups housing feature class. All you do, you treat it the exact same way as the first join. So you just do a right click, joins and relates, add a join. The only difference now is that the input join field, in this case, it didn't automatically select the correct one. So you're going to have to go back and choose it. And notice that they all have longer names now. So we see OC block groups _ housing dot object ID, county FIPS, and so on and so forth. Notice that it's basically giving you the name of the layer dot the field name. Now that probably tells you, if you scroll down, you'll then see, yes, data from the other joined file. It gives you the file name dot the field name. Okay. When you start to do joins, in the name itself, it gives you the full basically address of that data. So you have to know where it came from. In this case here, it's going to be OC block groups housing, and then the field, which is GeoID. So go ahead and select that. And now we're going to browse to our next data set, which is going to be the Occupancy Excel file. Let's go ahead and browse to that. Mine keeps going to the wrong location every single time. Back again. All right. Occupancy.slxs, select it, select the data table inside. Okay. GeoID, that's what we want, so make sure yours matches this. Hit OK. And then again, let's pan over a little bit farther and make sure that it includes all of the fields that we need, which are in this case persons per room 2+ and persons per room index, PPR index. Okay. And obviously, I am assuming that you've created these ones on your own because I didn't go over those in the tutorial, but it's in the lab, so make sure that you follow the lab, not just the video. Okay. Finally, we're going to do one more join, and this is going to be on the OCHH income file, the Orange County household income file from last week. So it may be in a different file location from your other two new Excel files, so make sure you know where to find that. So right-click, join, add a join, choose the GeoID field as your input join field again, browse, find the correct data. Okay, OCHH income is what we want. Then the Excel file or table inside. Okay, GeoID, correct. Okay, let it run. Scroll over to the right and make sure it has HH income and HH income index. All right, so we should have 3 index fields. All right, and these are the key things that we need. We need our tenure index first, our PPR index second, a persons per room index, and then finally the income index. All right, so we have 3 indices in the attribute table now. Okay, now if you'll recall at the beginning of this, I mentioned we're also going to make essentially what I'm calling a master index, which is an index of indices, 3 different indices added together and then divided by 3. It's not an exact science. There may be better methods for this, but essentially the way I'm going to create this master index is to take 3 of them, average them out, and in theory, if it's a higher average index, that means it is composed of 3 higher index numbers, right? So if each index is around, we'll say 8 or 9, then that master index is going to be around 8 or 9. If it's composed of like a 9, a 2, and a 4, it's going to be a bit lower on the 5, 6 end, right? So that's essentially the rationale behind creating the master index through that method. So first thing you need to do is add a field. So let's go ahead and do that. Make sure that you have the attribute table open for OC block groups housing, and then click on add. And that's going to bring up the field editor window. That's right here. Okay, so here's fields. I'll make this a little bit bigger so it's a little easier to see. So it lists all the fields that are currently in that data set, right? Including the ones that are in the join. And it has you add the field at the very end. Just so you know, it's actually permanently adding the field to the OC block groups housing feature class. The join data are temporary, but this field is permanent. So even though this field will appear at the end of the attribute table for now, once those joins are removed, it will essentially move over, if you will, get put back into place. So it's temporarily at the end of the field, but really it should be kind of more toward the beginning. Okay, so we're going to call it master index, no spaces. We're going to change the data type to double, which is double precision. It means you can have lots of numbers after the decimal place. Check highlight just to make it stand out more. And then click here under number format, hit the 3 dots to bring up the number format window, and let's change it to numeric. And let's see, we'll leave rounding at 6 and hit OK. Okay. All right, now this is crucial. Do not miss a step. Click Save right here. Okay, so on the Fields tab, which is a contextual tab, which is not always there, so you don't want to lose it and have to try to find it again, just click Save now. Okay, so it makes that new field permanent. Once it's saved, the little save icon will be grayed out so you know that your work is saved, and you can then close the Fields editor and that will bring you back to your attribute table. Just going to shrink that up a bit now. And now it's time to populate the master index field through the method I mentioned earlier. Okay. So anytime you want to calculate a field, or when I say populate a field, I mean calculate a field in this case, you just right-click the field and click on Calculate Field. So Field Calculator allows you to do a lot of things. You can do basic math, you can add fields together, you can multiply, you can put in entire block codes in Python down here. There's a lot you can do here. Ours is going to be on the simpler side. We're essentially taking 3 fields, adding them together, and then dividing them, their total by 3, the sum by 3. And so if you get lost here, you can, on page 16, you can always go back and literally copy and paste the text from step 3. It's technically 3CI. 3C1, but on step 3 at page 16, you can do that. But I think you'll be able to build it out yourself. So not in the code block field, but here in OC block groups, housing master index is equal to or equals. You're going to go open parentheses. Then you're going to find tenure index, double click, hit the plus button here, and now you're going to find PPR index plus income index. Put your cursor in here, close parentheses, divided by 3, and then hit OK. And if all goes well, you are going to have a master index field that's now been populated. You shouldn't have any number greater than 1. Okay. You may have some nulls, you will have some nulls, and you may have some zeros, right? So if you have a 0, that means that every single one of those indices, not indice numbers or index numbers, were 0, which means that had very high income, very low persons per bedroom occupancy, and no rental units. It's possible, okay? But more likely it's going to be somewhere between 0 and 1. All right, so we've got that filled out or populated. The next thing we're going to do is visualize housing needs in Orange County. And I think this will probably be the last step I do with you, and then I'll let you complete the rest on your own because I've already gone through quite a bit of it. But it will be good for you to finish the last steps on your own. And again, the lab's pretty explicit, so you shouldn't get lost. So we're going to symbolize block groups using the master index field that we just created. So that means the keyword there is symbolize. So we're going to change symbology, make sure that OC block groups is highlighted, click on the appearance tab, the symbology button, and then just like last week we're going to change it from single symbol to graduated colors. But this week, instead of using the natural breaks or the Jenks method of classification, we're going to use standard deviation. And standard deviation is good for showing block groups in this case, or geographies that are far from the average, above the average, below the average, okay? And so that's why we're going to do that. So first thing we need to do is choose the input field. Input field will be master index. Should be at the very end. No normalization, just leave that as is. Change the method from natural breaks to standard deviation. Where's that? There it is. And then interval size, leave it as 1 standard deviation. If you do a half a standard, a third, or a quarter, it just creates more classes, which there could be use for that. But in our case, we're good with 6 classes, and that tells us all that we need to know. Okay, so make sure that it's 1 standard deviation. And then for color scheme, we're going to change it to orange, purple, continuous. Well, you've got an image of it on the lab, but the easiest thing to do is check this little option here, show names. And if show names is checked, then that way you don't have to guess. You can just move your cursor over it and it will tell you. So orange, purple, continuous, that's what we want. So go ahead and select it. And you should have something that looks exactly like this if all of your data were prepared the same way. So right off the bat, you'll probably notice this big empty gap here in the data. That would be a null value. So in the master index, we scroll down. Oh, once I go to sort ascending real quick. You'll see we've got a handful of nulls at the top. So 1, 2, 3, 4 nulls. Those are those with missing numbers for tenure index, for I will go past them all, income index, and PPR index, or at least one of them had a null. Okay, and that's because no one lives out there. Essentially, that's Cleveland National Forest. And then I think there's another null here, right in the center of Orange County. And as you can see on the map, that is Disneyland. Nobody lives in Disneyland except Mickey Mouse, and apparently they don't count him in the census. Okay, so go ahead and just leave it as is there. If you selected any data in your attribute table, hit the clear button. Make sure nothing is selected. And then one other symbology change, we're going to give it a transparency of 25%. Okay, and we are going to give it a new base map. That's on the map tab. Change base map to imagery with labels. And that will label the cities, but also give you an aerial photo. Finally, in this step, we're going to once again add the Orange County city boundaries from Portal. That's a data set that I've uploaded to the Cypress College data portal. So you hit add data, go to my organization in Portal, and then it should be the second one on the list. If you don't see it, just do a search for Orange County cities. So we'll add it to the map, and then change the symbology like so. So you'll have to maximize this layer, choose the color chip, color, no color, and you leave the outline. I guess you can't change the outline color. We're just going to change the thickness to 1.25 and apply. Okay, so now we can see Orange County a bit better. And now is a good time to save your project. Probably should have had you save your project a couple of times throughout this whole lab, but just like you, I often forget to save too. So you live by the sword, die by the sword. Okay, so I will probably leave it at that. We're already at 37 minutes. I think that you will be able to get through the rest on your own. The key thing over the next couple of steps is just to identify the highest need block groups in Orange County. Okay, so you'll see that if you do a sort descending on the master index field, you'll find all of those that happen to be in the highest standard deviation. Again, the instructions are in, the tutorial, or the lab rather, so make sure you follow along, but you should end up with 12 block groups that are in the highest standard deviation above the mean, and then it will be up to you to basically investigate them, learn something about them, and then choose two that you want to highlight. The ultimate goal is to have two new maps. You're going to create two new map layouts, and each one is going to highlight a specific block group that is extraordinarily above average in terms of its housing need. Okay, so I chose block group 06059099401, okay, which is actually Oakview, the Oakview neighborhood in Huntington Beach, and I've actually done some work on that area before in my demography life. It's a fairly poor neighborhood of high density housing in an otherwise fairly affluent city, Huntington Beach. And the other block group, I believe, is in Santa Ana. That's 06059074903. You don't need to know that, but just know that I've got those two that I chose. And then I created these little information boxes that you're going to have to create as well. So you're going to want to include the tenure index, the persons per room index, and the income index. And notice that each of these figures is fairly high. We've got tenure index, meaning 97% of the housing units in this block group are apartments. The persons per room is it's moderate, not terrible. Then income is on the lower end, so it would be 0.88, meaning that 12% of households are high income, I guess you could say, or moderate income. So a lot of people are low income there. Then over here, 88% of housing units are apartments, a lot of low-income households, and then even higher housing density or occupancy per room density. Okay, so you should upload your two maps, export them as PDFs, upload them to Canvas, and that will complete the assignment for you for this week. You don't have the questions where you need to answer any questions this week. It's just the two maps that I'm looking for. And so enjoy the week without the long lecture. We're going to jump into a new topic next week. We'll pull up the syllabus real fast, just so you can see, since I'm not doing a lecture, we'll use this for a time for announcements. Next week, we're going to get into mapping density. All right, so mapping density, you will be using Making Spatial Decisions using ArcGIS Pro next week. That is the textbook that if you took Geography 232 with me last semester, you use this book, and so you use it again a couple of times this semester, a few times actually. And if you didn't have my class, go ahead and buy the book because you're going to need to take 232 with Professor Blade, or actually myself. I'm going to teach it in the spring, and I will be using that same textbook next semester, primarily only that textbook plus some handouts. So I don't think I have you purchasing any other textbooks next semester, but you will absolutely need that one. So make sure you get it this semester, or you might already have it. And that does it for me for this week. I wish you all good health and being safe out there in COVID land. And email me with questions. Obviously available to do Zoom sessions on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And to those of you who've reached out, it's been good. We've made a lot of progress. Be mindful that project proposals are actually due October 11th. Those are coming up soon. So I will make sure that I make an announcement about that in this week's announcements. Project proposals, the assignment is on Canvas, so make sure you are paying attention to that. And then the week after is your midterm exam, okay? So just be mindful, pay attention to your syllabus. Hopefully everybody's getting as much as you can out of this online class. I'm having a good time so far. Hopefully you are too. Yeah, that's it for me. Have a good one. Bye-bye.